And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
That's Rachel Zegler reacting to the kind of backlash that no Hollywood actress wants to face. Since she was cast as Snow White in Disney's live-action remake, she's been bombarded with criticism, much of it rooted in issues of race and representation. But how did it all start? Let's rewind to where it all kicked off, beginning with the backlash that questioned her very right to play the iconic princess. Rachel Zegler reacts to casting criticism.
We saw you get emotional up on stage today. What was it like watching this footage with everyone here at D23?
Fun fact, I didn't get to watch it. I didn't see it. I have no idea what everybody was reacting to, but I saw the logo and I got really emotional.
When Rachel Zegler was announced as Snow White in Disney's 2021 live-action remake, the news didn't sit well with everyone. A lot of people were not happy with the news, mostly because Zegler, who's Colombian, didn't look like the traditional Snow White they'd grown up with. They thought it didn't quite fit, especially since Snow White's character has always been described with skin as white as snow. But Zegler didn't back down. Instead of staying quiet, she fired back, strong and confident, making it clear that this wasn't just about casting, it was about representation. Zegler defended her casting by pointing out how crucial it is for characters, especially ones like Snow White, to evolve and reflect the world we live in today. For Zegler, taking on the role of Snow White as a Latina wasn't just a part to play, it was a statement. "I will be a Latina princess," she proudly declared. For her, this kind of casting helped break down barriers and made room for more diverse stories in Hollywood. Zegler didn't just stop there. She explained how Snow White has a massive following in Spanish-speaking countries, so casting her made perfect sense. Instead of seeing this role as something that needed to fit into an old mold, she saw it as a way to shake things up, tell a new story, and change the narrative. It wasn't a problem to her, it was an honor. Even though there was plenty of pushback, Rachel Zegler didn't budge. She stood tall, sticking to her belief that she was exactly the right person for the role. Instead of backing off or apologizing, she doubled down, calling the opportunity to play Snow White an honor of a lifetime. She was clear that the criticism wasn't something personal. It was part of a bigger conversation about the need to change Hollywood's norms, and she was here for it. For Zegler, this wasn't just about landing another role. It was about being a part of something bigger. She saw this as a chance to represent a new generation and show that diversity is not just important but necessary in modern storytelling. Taking on Snow White wasn't going to be easy, but Zegler was up for the challenge. She knew she could bring something fresh to the character, but she also understood that it was about more than just how Snow White looked. It was about what she represented to young girls everywhere, especially those who looked like her. Being Snow White is not just about fairy tales, Zegler explained in an interview. She sees it as a way to ensure that every girl feels like she can be a princess, no matter where she comes from or what she looks like. This mindset made it clear that she was ready to bring her version of Snow White to life in a way that resonated with today's audience. When people questioned whether she had the right voice for Snow White, Zegler didn't hesitate. With confidence, she responded, "I am a soprano." She even pointed to her performance in West Side Story as proof. If there's one thing Zegler knows how to do, it's hit the high notes. This wasn't just about playing a princess. It was about showing the world she had the talent to back it up. For Zegler, her role as Snow White isn't about fitting into a mold, and she's made that very clear. When her ethnicity became a topic of debate, she didn't shy away from addressing it. Instead, she embraced it fully, defending the importance of breaking away from outdated casting traditions. Zegler sees her casting as a step forward for Hollywood, one that shows people from all backgrounds can take on roles once defined by narrow standards. "The reality is, I was given a chance because I could sing," Zegler said, reminding everyone that talent should always be the deciding factor in casting. For her, it's all about nurturing talent, regardless of what someone looks like. Snow White doesn't need to be just one thing. She can be many things, and that's what makes her so special. The accusations of miscasting have followed Zegler even in her previous movie roles, but she isn't backing down. In fact, she believes that these kinds of criticisms only highlight why Hollywood needs to change. Zegler sees her casting as part of a much-needed shift in the industry, one that embraces diversity and pushes for more inclusive stories. She believes talent should be nurtured and given opportunities no matter what they look like. It's a sentiment that's gaining more support in Hollywood, She wants to make it clear that the days of casting based on tradition, not talent, are over. Zegler's casting as Snow White is an example of what happens when you prioritize skill over appearance, and she's ready to lead the way. Despite all the noise, Zegler has held on to her belief that she's the perfect fit for the role. And it's not just about her singing ability, it's about Snow White's timeless appeal. The character has resonated with audiences across the globe for generations, and Zegler sees this as a perfect opportunity to bring her own unique version of the princess to life. Snow White's story is universal. Her kindness, courage, and resilience speak to everyone, regardless of where they come from. Zegler knows that she's not just playing a fairy tale character, she's representing something much larger, a new era of inclusivity in storytelling. For Zegler, this is more than just a role. It's a chance to use her platform to make a difference. When she talks about Snow White, it's clear that she sees the film as a way to tackle important social issues like race, prejudice, and division. Zegler sees Snow White as more than just a fairy tale. To her, it's about promoting kindness and acceptance. She believes her casting represents change, challenging traditional ideas about who can be a princess. By portraying a Latina Snow White, she hopes to show that talent should always come first, and that everyone deserves to see themselves reflected in the stories they love. Zegler's vision for Snow White goes beyond just making the character a reflection of today's world. She sees the role as an opportunity to show young girls everywhere that they can be princesses, no matter their background. It's about showing that kindness and compassion are what makes someone truly royal. There's nothing wrong with choosing to do what's right, Zegler said, hoping that Snow White will encourage kids to embrace love and kindness instead of division. The film isn't just about entertainment for her, it's about shaping the way the next generation thinks about diversity and acceptance. Snow White's story is beloved worldwide, and Zegler sees herself as part of that global connection. She notes that Snow White has a massive following in Spanish-speaking countries, making her casting feel like a natural fit. It's not just about changing a character's look, it's about bringing a new perspective to an old favorite. Snow White's journey of kindness and transformation speaks to people from all walks of life, and Zegler sees her role as an opportunity to make that message even stronger in today's world. Her casting as Snow White might be controversial to some, but Zegler has always been confident that this is a role she was meant to play. For her, it's not about fitting into the box of what a traditional princess should look like. It's about breaking that box wide open. Zegler believes that the future of Hollywood lies in embracing the diversity of the world we live in. Snow White may be a princess, but that doesn't mean she has to look or sound the same as she did in the past. Zegler's version of Snow White will be a princess for the new generation, a symbol of kindness, talent, and the power of representation. In her eyes, Snow White represents more than just a fairy tale. It's a chance to redefine what it means to be a princess. For Zegler, this isn't just about playing the part, it's about sending a message to young girls everywhere. She wants them to know that being a princess isn't about looking a certain way, it's about who you are inside. Zegler took the world by surprise with how well she defended her suitability for the role of Snow White. But it wasn't long before something controversial happened. She made some comments about the original Snow White, and soon the public discourse reached a whole new level: backlash and public controversies. From the moment Rachel Zegler was cast as Snow White, she knew her role in the remake was going to be a bit controversial. But her bold take on the 1937 classic was something few saw coming. Zegler didn't just slip into the role, she had something important to say about the original film.
I mean, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
For her, the 1937 animated Snow White was dated, and she wasn't shy about pointing out the flaws in how the movie had aged, particularly when it came to the prince's behavior. Now, let's take a step back and think about the iconic scene where Prince Charming kisses Snow White while she's asleep. In 1937, this was seen as a romantic gesture, the fairy tale moment we all grew up with. But in today's world, things look a little different. Zegler labeled the prince's actions as stalking, suggesting that what was once depicted as an innocent act could now be seen as problematic. She argued that Snow White needed a narrative where her autonomy was respected, where she wasn't just waiting around to be rescued. Zegler's comments resonated with many who felt it was time for a more modern take on the character, especially in the context of today's discussions about consent and agency. But Zegler's remarks weren't exactly embraced by everyone. For those who loved the original Snow White and the prince's gallant gesture, it felt like a direct attack on the heart of the fairy tale. Critics of Zegler's take argued that she misunderstood the charm and magic of the original film, which had been a cornerstone of Disney's success. The debate wasn't just about a movie anymore. It became a conversation about how far we should go to update something that was built in a completely different era. Things didn't exactly cool down after Zegler's initial comments. In fact, things only seemed to get more heated as 2023 rolled in. Clips from past interviews where Zegler had made her thoughts on Snow White clear resurfaced on social media. This time, the internet was ready for it.
I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again.
What started as a few clips gained traction and quickly became a firestorm. Some fans started to question whether Zegler was the right person for the role. After all, how could she truly embody Snow White if she was so critical of the movie that defined the character? It didn't help that these resurfacing interviews gave her critics another chance to accuse her of being too woke. For many, her critique of the classic movie felt like a step too far, an attempt to erase the past in favor of a modern agenda. On the other hand, there was a large group of people who supported Zegler. They saw her remarks as a refreshing perspective, an opportunity to rethink stories that had been told for generations with a new lens that was more in touch with contemporary issues. But despite the mixed reactions, one thing became clear. Snow White's remake was becoming more about Zegler's comments than the actual film. This battle of ideologies around the film's remake highlighted the intense scrutiny that actors face when they step into such iconic roles. Zegler's attempt to modernize Snow White was commendable to some, but to others, it felt like a betrayal of everything they loved about the original. No matter what side you were on, there was no ignoring the controversy that followed her every word. As the controversy reached its peak, Zegler took to social media to clarify her position. In a heartfelt message posted on X, she addressed the backlash and explained that her comments had been misinterpreted. She emphasized that she didn't mean to disrespect the original Snow White or its creators. Instead, she was simply pointing out aspects of the film that felt out of step with today's values, particularly regarding Snow White's passivity and the prince's behavior. Zegler admitted that her words were likely taken out of context, which she regretted. She explained that she had always respected the original film and wanted to honor its legacy while updating the character for a new generation. This was her attempt at a balancing act, trying to respect the past while making room for a more contemporary interpretation of Snow White. Her public clarification, however, didn't completely silence the controversy. Many of her critics weren't ready to let go of their opinions, and some felt that her apology was more about damage control than a genuine change of heart. But for others, Zegler's effort to explain herself was appreciated, and it gave some peace of mind to those who were unsure whether she had truly intended to disrespect the original. Still, the damage had been done. Zegler's attempt to modernize Snow White had already sparked conversation that went far beyond the film itself. As if the controversies around Snow White weren't already complicated enough, things took an unexpected turn when tensions began to surface between Rachel Zegler and her co-star, Gal Gadot. While the two actresses seemed to get along at first, their differing political views soon became a point of contention. Zegler, known for her outspoken support of Palestine, and Gadot, an Israeli actress who had served in the Israeli Defense Forces, found themselves on opposite sides of a heated political debate. This disagreement was not just personal, it spilled over into their professional lives, especially as the film went into production. Things worsened when Zegler appeared to exclude Gadot from a public tribute she made for the Snow White cast on social media. Gadot, who played the evil queen, was noticeably absent from the post, despite being one of the film's main stars. This exclusion didn't go unnoticed by fans and the media, and rumors quickly swirled about a possible rift between the two actresses. Though neither actress publicly acknowledged the tension, it was clear that their differing political beliefs were creating an uncomfortable atmosphere on set. The issue was bigger than just Snow White. It was a reflection of the broader political divides that seemed to influence even the most seemingly innocent of collaborations. Another controversial decision in the Snow White remake was Disney's choice to replace the traditional dwarf characters with CGI magical companions. While the goal was to avoid reinforcing stereotypes about people with dwarfism, this move sparked outrage, especially from actor Peter Dinklage.
They were very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White, but it makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave.
Dinklage, who is a strong advocate for more realistic and respectful representation of people with dwarfism in Hollywood, criticized the decision as offensive. He argued that Disney's attempt to modernize the dwarfs was just another example of the company sidestepping real opportunities to cast actors with dwarfism and offer them meaningful roles. For Dinklage, this wasn't just about the film, it was about a missed opportunity to address the lack of representation of people with dwarfism in the entertainment industry. The criticism sparked a broader conversation about inclusivity, with many questioning whether Disney had made the right choice in moving away from the traditional portrayal of the dwarfs. Instead of casting actual dwarfs, Disney opted to use CGI companions in an effort to avoid reinforcing stereotypes. But Dinklage and others in the disability advocacy community saw this as a missed chance for authentic representation. The question remained, were Disney's intentions to modernize the film truly progressive, or did they ultimately do more harm by removing the opportunity for actors with dwarfism to take on these iconic roles? It wasn't just Snow White's production and casting choices that kept the public talking. Rachel Zegler, already a polarizing figure, found herself in even hotter water when her social media comments about Donald Trump's re-election sparked a political firestorm. In the aftermath of the 2024 U.S. presidential election, Zegler took to social media to express her discontent with Trump's victory and his supporters. Her posts were filled with sharp language and calls for political change. For some, Zegler's comments were seen as a brave stand against what they viewed as a dangerous political figure. But for others, especially Trump supporters, Zegler's comments were a step too far. Calls for an apology flooded social media, and the backlash was swift. While Zegler's political activism had been a hallmark of her public persona, this particular instance added fuel to the already heated discussions surrounding her role in Snow White. Critics argued that celebrities should keep their political opinions to themselves, especially when their remarks could alienate fans. Zegler's comments became more than just political. They became a part of the ongoing drama surrounding the film. Adding another layer of complexity to the Snow White remake's controversies was the backlash from the Arab world. This time, the protests weren't directed at Zegler, but at Gal Gadot. Gadot, an Israeli actress, had served in the Israeli Defense Forces, a connection that many saw as a political statement. Activists from across the Arab world voiced their opposition to Gadot's involvement in the film, calling for a boycott of Snow White. The reason? Gadot's service in the IDF, which they believed contradicted the film's purported themes of peace and inclusivity. For these activists, her past was a political statement that could not be overlooked. The boycott calls quickly gained traction, particularly on social media, where the situation spiraled into a larger political debate about representation, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and Hollywood's complicity in global politics. Disney found itself caught in a difficult situation. While the studio had hoped the film would be a global hit, the political controversy surrounding Gadot's past made it harder to avoid the cultural and political complexities at play. The question became, should a film be judged based on the political views of its cast, or should the art be separated from the artist? As if the film's controversies weren't enough, Snow White's remake faced criticism from those who felt it had lost touch with the magic of the original film. David Hand, the son of one of the original creators of Snow White, publicly denounced the remake as disrespectful to the classic and its legacy. He argued that the modern take on the story stripped away the magic and charm that had made Snow White a beloved classic for decades. Hand's remarks reflected the feelings of many fans who felt that the remake didn't honor the original film's spirit. The decision to modernize Snow White by introducing new characters, changing the dwarfs, and tweaking key story elements left many wondering, was the remake an improvement, or did it miss the point of what made the original so special? As the backlash continued to intensify, Zegler found herself at the center of not just criticism, but also an outpouring of support from some of Hollywood's biggest names. Celebrities support Zegler. One of the first big names to have Zegler's back was Ariana Grande. Ariana, having faced her own fair share of public scrutiny, knew exactly what Zegler was going through. She didn't just offer a few words of encouragement, she went all in. Grande publicly praised Zegler's performance as Snow White, calling it absolutely beautiful, and making it clear that she was there for her when things got tough. But it wasn't just about public praise. Behind the scenes, Grande reached out to Zegler, offering personal support and advice on how to handle the public drama. Zegler herself acknowledged just how much this meant to her, calling Ariana so deeply kind and saying her words had been a major boost in a time that could have easily gotten overwhelming. Zegler wasn't just supported by celebrities outside the film. Her Snow White co-star, Andrew Burnap, also became one of her biggest allies. Burnap, who played Jonathan in the film, saw firsthand how Zegler handled the intense public pressure. In interviews, he made it clear that Zegler's ability to stay calm, focused, and professional, despite the backlash, was something he deeply admired. He didn't just talk about her in a general way, though. Burnap praised her performance, calling her an excellent choice for the role and acknowledging the tremendous pressure she faced. He admired her strength and the grace with which she handled the criticism. For someone who was right there with Zegler on set, those words carried a lot of weight. It was more than just a public endorsement. It was a recognition of her talent and dedication to the film. Burnap's support was crucial, especially when you consider the pressure of being in the public eye with a co-star facing criticism. His decision to consistently defend her made a strong statement that Zegler's worth as Snow White wasn't up for debate in his eyes. Halle Bailey, the star of The Little Mermaid, knew exactly what Zegler was going through. Having faced intense backlash herself for playing Ariel in the live-action remake of that classic, Bailey reached out to Zegler to express solidarity. Bailey's support wasn't just about sharing a similar experience. It was about uniting two actresses who were both taking on roles that had sparked public debate due to their race. Both Zegler and Bailey were breaking away from traditional casting, and they understood the responsibility that came with those roles. Bailey, who had navigated criticism and negativity from fans, made sure to send Zegler a message of encouragement. She publicly voiced her support, telling the world that Zegler had what it took to overcome the backlash. As someone who had walked a similar path, Bailey's words carried an extra layer of depth. She knew what it was like to take on a beloved character, only to have the public respond in ways that felt unfair and hurtful. But it wasn't just her peers who offered support. Zegler also received guidance from some of the most respected voices in the industry. Veterans like Jamila Jamil, Helen Mirren, and Lucy Liu reached out to help Zegler stay grounded as the criticism mounted. These industry heavyweights didn't just give Zegler a pat on the back. They offered valuable advice on how to handle the pressures of fame and public scrutiny. Helen Mirren, for example, shared her experiences of facing public criticism throughout her career and how she learned to navigate those rough waters. Lucy Liu, known for her role in Charlie's Angels and other major films, also provided mentorship, emphasizing the importance of staying true to oneself amidst external pressures. Jamil, too, who's no stranger to the ups and downs of fame, reassured Zegler that she wasn't alone in her journey. Her guidance focused on the emotional side of public scrutiny, reminding Zegler to take care of her mental health and to surround herself with people who truly have her best interests at heart. Having these seasoned professionals offer advice and encouragement gave Zegler a steady foundation. It wasn't just about enduring the storm, it was about using the experience to grow stronger. While Zegler had the backing of industry pros and peers, the support didn't stop there. Her fans, the true lifeblood of any celebrity's public persona, also rallied around her. Online, they shared positive reviews and created fan art to show their love for the young actress. On platforms like X, Instagram, and TikTok, Zegler's fans stood up for her casting and confronted the critics head-on. They weren't just cheering her on from the sidelines, they were actively defending her in the comment sections and on posts across the internet. These fans weren't just mindlessly following her, they were fully invested in her success and ready to battle any negativity that came her way. The digital army that supported Zegler didn't just defend her, it turned the conversation around. They shared their own personal reasons for supporting Zegler's Snow White, explaining why they saw her as the perfect fit for the role. This grassroots support helped shift the key narrative from criticism to celebration. At public events and premieres, Zegler wasn't left to face the spotlight alone. Her co-stars and industry peers made sure to publicly display their support for her. Whether it was on the red carpet or in interviews, they weren't shy about expressing how much they admired Zegler's resilience. Even with the support of fellow stars, the Snow White remake struggled to live up to the high expectations set by its legacy, leaving many to question whether the changes had truly paid off. Snow White remake falls. Short of expectations, Disney's 2025 remake of Snow White had all the makings of a blockbuster hit, except it didn't quite hit the mark. The film, which boasted a hefty $250 million budget, opened with a domestic total of $43 million and $44 million internationally. That's a far cry from the success Disney hoped for, especially when you consider the film's massive production costs. In comparison, The Lion King, 2019, raked in a jaw-dropping $191 million in its opening weekend, making this Snow White debut feel rather underwhelming. Critics weren't exactly kind either. With only 44% positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, the film struggled to win over the critics. The main complaints? The pacing felt off. The tone didn't quite match what many expected from the beloved fairy tale, and it strayed too far from the original Disney classic. Fans of the animated version were left disappointed, while those hoping for a fresh take on the story found themselves underwhelmed by the execution. Critics pointed out that while the film attempted to modernize the classic, it didn't do so in a way that was meaningful or engaging enough to resonate with today's audiences. But the lackluster performance of Snow White didn't just spark disappointment, it also fueled conspiracy theories. Some speculated that the film's underperformance wasn't an accident. There were whispers suggesting that Disney's marketing strategy, which seemed to stir up controversy over Rachel Zegler's comments about the original film, may have been a deliberate attempt to generate buzz. After all, Zegler, who was cast as Snow White, had criticized the original 1937 film for its outdated themes, particularly the prince's behavior, calling it stalking. While some thought this would create a dialogue and boost interest, others believed it alienated the very audience Disney hoped to win over. Rather than building excitement, it seemed to only deepen. The divide between critics of the remake and those longing for a faithful tribute to the original. It's possible that Disney miscalculated how far to push the conversation surrounding the film's modern sensibilities, especially when combined with Zegler's outspoken political views. Adding fuel to the fire, some conspiracy theorists even suggested that political figures and influencers may have worked behind the scenes to undermine the film. These theorists argued that Zegler's political remarks and casting as a Latina Snow White made the film an easy target for those eager to oppose what they perceived as Disney's shift toward progressive narratives. The focus on inclusivity and modernizing the story led to accusations that Disney was pushing too hard to adapt the classic for today's sensibilities, and some fans felt that the magic of Snow White was being lost in the process. So, how do you modernize a fairy tale that's been etched into pop culture for generations without losing what made it magical in the first place? And when you add social awareness and representation to the mix, where's the sweet spot between tradition and progress? These are the questions Disney will likely keep grappling with as they plan their next moves. Meanwhile, audiences continue to debate where to draw the line between staying true to a story's roots and adapting it for today's world. Thanks for watching. If you had a good time, keep the adventure alive by clicking on one of the suggested videos on your screen right now for more amazing content.